Very much having each of you with us today. Those of you who are visiting with us, if you haven't had an opportunity to take one of the cards out of the rack in front of you and fill it out, appreciate it if you would do that, and you can just hand it to me at the back door as we're leaving. Matthew 15:11 is a passage that we will encounter quite a bit in this particular lesson today. What goes into a person's mouth doesn't make him unclean. It's what comes out of the mouth that makes a person unclean. Probably one of the things that most people don't think very much about is the fact that your mouth is a window to your soul. And that by considering the things that come out of your mouth, that's how people will determine who and what you are. Because if you stop and think about it, when you listen to people, when you listen to what individuals have to say, you immediately form an opinion about who they are and what their real intentions are. And a lot of times we form just very lasting ideas about that individual, and usually the conversations that we have and the things that take place continue to confirm the beliefs and the ideas that we have picked up. In the 18th verse of Matthew 15, but whatever goes out of the mouth comes from within, and that makes a person unclean. Jesus had encountered the Pharisees, and they were concerned because his apostles were not washing their hands before they ate. This was a Jewish tradition, and at the time that Jesus was here, the traditions had basically taken over and were basically in control of everything religiously as far as they were concerned. And so Jesus came at a very appropriate time. And the criticism that they were making of Christ in regard to washing the hands had actually nothing to do with the scriptures whatsoever. And so basically the lesson that we have today is one that was presented by Christ to the Pharisees over 2,000 years ago. Because basically the same kind of thing takes place today. Individuals say and do things that they believe are correct. They base it on the opinions and the ideas that they have that have been from who knows where in their lives. And the bottom line of it is that much of what is presented is not really what God wants, but it's something that men have come up with and the ideas that they have. And as we look at these things, you look at the tongue as James speaks of it in the 3rd chapter and the 6th verse. The tongue is what is that kind of flame. It is a world of evil among the parts of our bodies, and it completely contaminates our bodies. The tongue sets our lives on fire and is itself set on fire from hell. Now, if you take the time to really think about it, think about some of the things that take place as a result of the use of the tongue. And we have that, of course, available to us in the Gospel of Mark in the 7th chapter in verses 20 to 23. He continued, it's what comes out of a person that makes him unclean. Evil thoughts, sexual sins, stealing, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, cheating, shameless lust, envy, cursing, arrogance, and foolishness come from within a person. All of these evils come from within and make a person unclean. So when you stop and think about it, when you apply this and put all of this together, all of these are evil thoughts, basically. They come from within the individual. And again, the idea is the topic of the lesson is sin's source. The source of sin is in your mind. Under the Mosaic law, you had to actually commit the act in order to be guilty of it. In other words, adultery could only be committed as a result, or could be condemned only as a physical act. But under the Christian dispensation, adultery is simply the thought process. And this, of course, is the major change that has taken place for us today. And so what Mark is telling us, what James is telling us is very simple. It's that what you have in your mind is what you are. And when you open your mouth, what comes out of your mouth tells everyone, including you, who and what you are within. Every one of us have encountered those individuals that can't seem to say anything. They have to punctuate every sentence with four-letter words or take the Lord's name in vain, and that there just does not seem to be any way that they can communicate without doing these kinds of things. What that is telling you is that's the kind of person that you're dealing with, because that is what is really controlling them. That is what is in their brain, which is the heart as far as the scriptures are concerned. So when you start running into these kind of things, and a lot of this is going to be repetitious today, because I want you to understand just how much the Lord intended for us to understand that with the use of our mouth is a very important thing. And that when we recognize that our mouth is not producing the kind of results that it should, that is an indicator to us that we need to straighten our lives out. We need to do some house cleaning, because what's taking place within us is not what should be there. In Matthew 12:34, you poisonous snakes, how can you evil people say anything good? Your mouth says what comes from inside you. So Jesus, some of the strongest language that Jesus used while he was here is in this very regard, in talking about what people say. And this is something that we kind of overlook basically today. It's just sort of an accepted thing that an individual takes the Lord's name in vain one way or the other, or they bring out some other particular thing. They make some really atrocious type statements and all that. And we just, that's just kind of society today. If you watch a movie, I doubt that there's a movie that's produced today, hardly none of the ones that I've ever heard of, where four-letter words are not the basic fundamental thing as far as the particular script is concerned. We watched partially a movie the other night, and Becky's comment was, well, it didn't take the writers didn't have to have a very large vocabulary for this particular script. And unfortunately, that has become the accepted thing in our society. I can remember a time when somebody said what would be a relatively minor four-letter word today on TV or somewhere like that, and everyone was shocked. How could they possibly say something like that? Now it's just common. It's just the thing that people do all of the time. And Jesus says, you're a poisonous snake when you're doing that, because it's poison that you're putting out. And the problem with it is that we are surrounded by it, and as we are surrounded by it, we absorb it, whether we think we do or not. And we will find ourselves, and something happens, and we want to express ourselves in the same way as we have heard other individuals do it. So we need to spend some time thinking about this. Going back to the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 7, verses 16 to 20. You will know them by what they produce. People don't pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles, do they? In the same way, every good tree produces good fruit, but a rotten tree produces bad fruit. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, and a rotten tree cannot produce good fruit. Any tree that fails to produce good fruit is cut down and thrown into a fire. So you will know them by what they produce. Now, that's the situation we have with trees. We recognize if you have a natural apple tree, orange tree, if you have a wild orange, if any of you have ever tried it, you know that's not the kind of oranges you want to eat. Now, that makes very good stock for grafting in a good orange, or pamplemousse. I can't get the French out of my mind. But if you graft into that, it makes very good stock for growing a good tree. But the tree itself and the fruit that it produces is such that you can't really use it. So what we have to do is to recognize that the same thing is true in our lives. When the kind of conversation that we produce and the things we say and all of that demonstrate that what is within us is not what it should be, then how are we going to possibly influence individuals to make changes in their lives to live as the Lord would have them to? When someone sees you or hears you expressing yourself in a way that's contrary to what they even recognize and the world recognizes is the way a Christian should speak, they immediately form the opinion that so many have. Well, they're just a bunch of hypocrites. They say one thing and they say another. I hear them saying the same things that I say, so where's the difference? They obviously don't believe what they preach. And they're true. They're accurate. It's absolutely right on the money, because obviously we don't. If we're using the same language they are, we obviously don't think any different than they do. And so just going through the motions of being a Christian is not the answer. It takes a lot more than that. It takes the actual living process in order to be what we should be. Excuse me. In the Hebrews, the 3rd chapter, in verses 12 to 13, be careful, brothers and sisters, that none of you ever develop a wicked, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. Encourage each other every day while you have the opportunity. If you do this, none of you will be deceived by sin and become stubborn. And this is what happens. Individuals become stubborn about, they get encouraged, and that's what we need to do, is encourage each other to help to motivate us to do the things we need to do, to study, to try to improve our understanding of what God has in His Word. And yet sometimes it seems like that no matter what you do, nobody's interested. I really don't care. It's excuse me. I go through, I go to church on Sunday and I sit through Bible class and all that. Well, what does God really expect of me? I'm sacrificing that much of my time every first day of the week, and so I ought to be able to do kind of what I want to do the other times of the week, and never stop to think about the fact that God has provided you with the air you breathe, the water you drink, the life that you live. All of these things are not yours. They were given to you. They are provided for you. And individuals immediately say, well, I make my own living. I earn my own money. Do you? Do you really earn your own money? Where did the skill come from that provides you with the ability to do it, or the intellectual capability to accomplish it? Did you develop that yourself? What is your IQ? Did that come? That's something you developed yourself, or your mother and daddy gave it to you? Afraid not. They gave it to you, but it was not by their choice what it was. So when we start thinking about how much we have done for ourselves and how important it is and how important we are, we're barking up the wrong tree. Because in reality, God has given all of it to us. And so how we use this has become very important, and we need to encourage each other to develop what we have and to become better. In the military, that's what you do. Christianity is really, in a lot of ways, in a lot of expressions in the scriptures, almost like a military organization. And the idea is to encourage and to build up every individual within it. In military units, you don't just learn just your job, but you learn to do the jobs of other individuals as well, so that you can accomplish the things that are necessary to achieve your mission. Christians need to recognize they need to do that too. We need to expand our capabilities. We need to reach out and be able to do other things. And the fact that, as most say, well, I can't do that job as well as so-and-so can, that's not important. How well you do it is not what God is looking at. He's looking at whether you do it or not, whether you apply the ability that you have and attempt to accomplish what He wants with you. But we'll see that again. In Ephesians 4:20-22, but that is not what you learned from Christ's teachings. You have certainly heard His message and have been taught His ways. The truth is in Jesus. You were taught to change the way that you were living. The person you used to be will ruin you through desires that deceive you. In other words, you've got to make a change. Our lives have to take a different course than what they were originally, or what they were that we had grown into. And if we don't make that choice, if we don't make the change, it will destroy us. Because living as the world would have you to live, using your thinking process in the way the world does, will destroy you. Because it is contrary to God and contrary to His desires and His will for us. So we have to recognize that we need to get these things under control and to get them out of our lives. Colossians 3:8, also get rid of your anger, hot tempers, hatred, cursing, obscene language, and all similar sins. Now, you mean it's a sin when I say blankety blank blank, you know? Well, yeah, absolutely it is. That's really the case. And so, how many of those sins do we add up there? How big a pile do we accumulate before it really becomes something that concerns us? So when we find ourselves running off at the mouth, you know, you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off, and you say, blankety blank, and without even thinking about it, because we have been conditioned to think that way. That tells you immediately that there is some work that needs to be done. We need to learn to control ourselves. We need to learn to control our speech and our thinking process, and recognize that the fact that that individual cut you off probably added 2 seconds to your travel time. So, you know, and maybe it might have even saved your life, because maybe that 2 seconds will be what keeps you from being hit by a train when the signal wasn't working. So, you know, we get all bent out of shape. You go to Walmart and they never have enough cashiers working. And so you have to stand in line and wait, and then somebody has something that doesn't have a barcode on it, so they've got to go hunt for it and all. And we're standing there hopping and jumping around like a cat on a hot tin roof, because we're being held up, and the delay is 2 or 3 minutes. And we act as if that somehow or other has changed the course of human history. So what we need to do is to recognize that we need to slow down and recognize that we need to live our lives, and that we need to work on directing our lives in the way they need to go, and not get all bent out of shape over things that, to start with, you can't change. Do you recognize that only 10% of what happens to you today will be what you choose to do? 90% of the decisions you make today will be the result of that 10%. So you control 9/10 of what happens in your life today. And then we say, I couldn't help it. Yes, you could. You could help it, because you had a choice. You had the opportunity to make a decision, and it was up to you to make it. If you made the wrong decision, then that was yours, baby. It belongs to you. It wasn't God's. He didn't make it for you. You made it. And I don't care how much political correctness you talk about. When you make a decision, the consequences are yours. Yours alone. They belong strictly to you. You can't blame mama or daddy or the kids or whatever on it. It's yours. It belongs to you. And that we need to be big enough to be able to accept that. In Hebrews 12:1, since we are surrounded by so many examples of faith, we must get rid of everything that slows us down, especially sin that distracts us. We must run the race that lies ahead of us and never give up. If you want to run successfully, or swim, or whatever like that, have you ever noticed that runners track, they wear brogans, don't they, to run in, you know, and they wear the heaviest clothes they can find, and all this. All these things that would be extra burden to carry. That's what they do. Swimmers today, when you look at them, it wouldn't be much, or they wouldn't have anything at all on them. And that apparently is the direction, because they want to be as streamlined as possible. So when we think about these things, we're going to run a race, and Christianity is a race. What do you want to do? How much baggage do you want to carry with you? How much of a load do you want to place on yourself? By adding all of the things and the encumbrances of the world, all of the thinking processes of the world, all of these things, you add them onto yourself, and that makes your race as a Christian that much more difficult. So the Hebrew writer simply says, just get rid of it. Unload the baggage. Leave it behind. Don't try to carry it. And if you've got a problem that you need to get rid of, give it to the Lord. He can handle it. Just give it to Him, but let Him have it. So many times individuals will say, well, I've had this burden on me, you know, and I prayed about it, but nothing ever happens about it. But the problem is that instead of giving the problem to the Lord, we give it to him, and then we think about it and we say, well, I don't think you can handle this. I better take it back myself. And then we wonder why we stay burdened down. So we need to learn to unload. 1 Peter 2:1. So get rid of every kind of envy, every kind of deception, hypocrisy, jealousy, and every kind of slander. If you take all of those things out of your life, it'll lighten your load considerably. There are people that we like and people that we don't like. Jesus was the same way. There were people he liked and people he didn't like. And the problem with it, though, is that we let this become a burden to us. We let it load us down, and we get involved in this, and we become hypocritical of the things we say and that we do, or we're jealous of somebody else. He got the promotion and it should have been mine because I'm better I'm better qualified than he is, and he shouldn't have gotten that job at all. That was my job, and he took it. Well, maybe the Lord did you a favor, because maybe that was the wrong kind of job for you to begin with. But nevertheless, we need to learn to live our lives and to deal with things in a way that makes sense, instead of always looking for some kind of deception or some kind of feeling that we're being shortchanged in some way or other, and recognize that we, as we say, 10% of it is ours, and we make 90% of the decisions of what to do with it. So we need to think about that when we get all concerned about all of these other things that are going on. 1 Thessalonians 2:12. You should live in a way that proves you belong to the God who calls you into his kingdom and his glory. In other words, live in such a way that when people see you and when they come in contact with you, they recognize that it's the Lord in your life that makes you different. That you don't have to express yourself with profanity because you actually know enough of the English language and have acquired enough of vocabulary so that you can talk without using four-letter words to express it. It's a shame, really, for someone with any intelligence to get themselves into a position where they actually can't use an entire sentence without punctuating it with some kind of profanity. Because, it just really, I've always heard that it was just a demonstration of a weak mind anyway. Somebody that couldn't think for themselves. In Ephesians 4:31, get rid of your bitterness, hot tempers, anger, loud quarreling, cursing, and hatred. If you take these things and you take these out of your heart, you get rid of the bitterness and the getting all bent out of shape because things don't happen to go your way at some particular time, or just angry. I'm just upset about it. Most of the time when you get angry, what you need to do is analyze, why are you angry? And most of the time you'll find that it's you that's the cause of the anger. It's something that you have done yourself or that has caused it to take place. So we need to take the time to recognize that we don't need those things there. And quarreling with somebody over something, I'm sure you witnessed the same thing I have. You have two people and they're just at each other's face, just going there. Actually, you almost feel like you have to wipe your face because they're just spewing back and forth. And when you listen to what they're saying, they're both saying the same thing, just saying it a different way. We need to learn to communicate, and we need to learn to listen to what's going on. We got one mouth, we have two eyes to see with, we have two ears to hear with. So that should tell us something about how much looking and listening we should be doing as compared to how much talking we should be doing. And if we would talk a lot less and listen a lot more, we would have a lot less problems. That goes internationally as well as locally. So what we need to do is to recognize that the Lord is giving us good advice about the way we need to conduct our lives, and that we need to live in a way that is the way it should be, and that we need to take the evil thoughts and speaking out of our lives completely. But from the Sermon on the Mount, the one that you really need to nail this lesson down, Matthew 5, verse 20, I can guarantee that unless you live a life that has God's approval and do it more faithfully than the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Now that tells you, when you let your mouth control your actions, when you live a life that is contrary to what God would have it to be, Jesus guarantees that you will not be one of those that goes away into an everlasting happiness. You'll be headed the other direction. That's how important controlling your mouth and your mind is. Just that important. Because it will decide whether you go to heaven or to hell. Sin begins in your heart and is expressed through your mouth. And if you think about it, virtually every sin that you can commit is a result of the thinking process that you have had and the words that you have said to go with it. So we need to recognize that we need to use our mouth and our thinking in the right direction. Today, you have that opportunity. You have the opportunity to ask for forgiveness of shortcomings that have been in your life and to have brethren pray for you here, as James 5 tells us. Or if you've never become a member of the body of Christ, you have the opportunity to acknowledge that need in your life, that you believe and accept Jesus as God's Son, that you're willing to confess Him before men, and that you're willing to be buried with Him in baptism, that you might be raised to walk in a new life. Those are the options that are available to you. And you will decide today, one way or the other, if this need exists in your life. So we invite you to think on these things as we can assist you in any way, to let it be known by coming forward as we stand and as we sing.
Would you